So, once again, welcome on in as we are intend on finishing up with Phantastes, Faerie Romance by George MacDonald. As we will be, and we are continuing with chapter 19. Okay, so chapter 19. In still rest and changeless simplicity I bear, uninterrupted, the consciousness of the whole of humanity within me. Schleiermacher, Monologen. Such a sweetness, such a grace, in all thy speech appear, that what to thy beauteous face, that thy tongue is to the ear. Cowley. The water was deep to the very edge, and I sprang from the little boat upon a soft, grassy turf. The island seemed rich with a profusion of grasses and low flowers. All delicate, lowly things were most plentiful, but no trees rose upwards, not even a bush. Overtopped the tall grasses, except in one place near the cottage I'm about to describe, were a few plants of the gum cistus, which drops every night all the blossoms that the day brings forth, formed a kind of natural arbor. The whole island lay open to the sky and sea. It rose nowhere more than a few feet above the level of the waters, which flowed deep all around its border. Here there seemed to be neither tide nor storm. A sense of persistent calm and fullness rose in the mind at the sight of the slow pulse-like rise and fall of the deep, clear, unrippled waters against the bank of the island. For sure it could hardly be called, being so much more like the edge of a full, solemn river. As I walked over the grass towards the cottage, which stood a little distant from the bank, all the flowers of childhood looked at me with perfect child eyes out of the grass. My heart, softened by the dreams through which it had passed, overflowed in a sad, tender love towards them. They looked to me like children impregnably fortified in a helpless confidence. The sun stood halfway down the western sky, shining very soft and golden, and there grew a second world of shadows amidst the world of grasses and wild flowers. The cottage was square with low walls and a high pyramidal roof thatched with long reeds, of which the withered blossoms hung over all the eaves. It is noticeable that most of the buildings I saw in Fairyland were cottages. There was no path to a door, nor indeed was there any track worn by footsteps in the island. The cottage rose right out of the smooth turf. It had no windows that I could see, but there was a door in the center of the side facing up, to which I went in, knocked in the sweetest voice I had ever heard say, "Come in." I entered. A bright fire was burning on a hearth in the center of the earthen floor, and the smoke found its way out an opening in the center of the pyramidal roof. Over the fire hung a little pot, and over the pot bent a woman face, the most wonderful I thought that I had ever beheld, for it was older than any countenance I had ever looked upon. There was not a spot in which a wrinkle could there was not a spot in which a wrinkle could lie, where a wrinkle lay not, and the skin was ancient and brown like old parchment. The woman's form was tall and spare, and when she stood up to welcome me, I saw that she was straight as an arrow. Could that voice of sweetness have issued from those lips of age? Mild as they were, could they be the portals where flowed such melody? But the moment I saw her, I no longer wondered at her voice. They were absolutely young, those of a woman of 25, large and of a clear gray. Wrinkles had beset them all about. The eyelids themselves were old and heavy and worn, but the eyes were very incarnations of soft light. She held out her hand to me, and a voice of sweetness again greeted me, with the single word, "Welcome." She set an old wooden chair for me near the fire, and went on with her cooking. A wondrous sense of refuge and repose came upon me. I felt like a boy who has got home from school miles across the hills, through a heavy storm of wind and snow. Almost as I gazed on her, I sprang from my seat to kiss those old lips, and when, having finished her cooking, she brought some of the dish she had prepared, and set it on a little table by me, covered with a snow-white cloth. I could not help laying my head on her bosom and bursting into happy tears. She put her arms around me. Poor, poor child. As I continued to weep, she gently disengaged herself and taking a spoon, put some of the food, I did not know what it was, to my lips, entreating me most endearingly to swallow it. To please her, I made an effort and succeeded. She went on feeding me like a baby, with one arm round me, till I looked up in her face and smiled. Then she gave me the spoon and told me to eat, for it would do me good. I obeyed her, and found myself wonderfully refreshed. Then she drew near the fire an old-fashioned couch that was in the cottage, and making me lie down upon it, sat at my feet and began to sing. Amazing store of old ballads rippled from our lips over the pebbles of ancient rhymes, and the voice that sang was sweet as the voice of a tuneful maiden that singeth ever from very fullness of song. The songs were almost all sad, but with the sound of comfort. One I can faintly recall. It was something like this. Sir Aglovale through the churchyard road, sing all alone I lie. Little reckoned he where'er he rode, alone up in the sky. Swerved his courser, and plunged with fear, all alone I lie. His cry might have wakened the dead men near, all alone up in the sky. The very dead that lay at his feet, lapped in the mouldy winding sheet. But he curbed him and spurred him until he stood still in his place like a horse of wood, with nostrils uplift and eyes wide and wan. But the sweat in streams from his fetlocks ran. A ghost grew out of the shadowy air, and sat in the midst of her moony hair. And her gleamy hair she sat and wept, and the dreamful moon there lay and slept. The shadows above and the bodies below lay and slept in the moonbeam slow, and she sang like the moan of an autumn wind over the stubble left behind. Alas, how easily things go wrong, a sigh too much or a kiss too long, and there follows a mist and a weeping wren, and life is never the same again. Alas, how hardly things go right, 'tis hard to watch on a summer night, for the sigh will come and the kiss will stay, and the summer night is a winter day. O lovely ghost, my heart is woes to see the weeping and wailing so. Lovely ghost of the fearless night, can the sword of a warrior set it right? Or prayer of beadsman praying mild, as a cup of water a feverish child, soothe thee at last in dreamless mood, to sleep a dead lady should. Then eyes they filled with longing sore, as if I had known thee forevermore. Lovely ghost, I could leave the day, to sit with thee in the moon away, if thou wouldst trust me and let thy head to rest on a bosom that is not dead. The lady sprang up with a strange ghost cry, and she flung her white ghost arms on high, and she laughed a laugh that was not gay, and it lengthened out till it died away. And the dead beneath turned and moaned, and the yew trees above they shuddered and groaned. Will he love me twice for a love that is vain? Will he kill the poor ghost yet again? Aye, thou wert good, but I said and wept. Can I have dreamed who have not slept? And I knew, alas, or ere I would, whether I dreamed or thou wert good. When my baby died, my brain grew wild. I woke and found I was with my child. If thou art the ghost of my Adelaide, how is it thou wert but a village maid? And thou seemest an angel, lady white, though thin and wan and past delight. The lady smiled a flickering smile, and she pressed her temples hard the while. Thou seest that death for a woman can do more than knighthood for a man. But show me the child thou callest mine. Is she out tonight in the ghost sunshine? In St. Peter's Church she is playing on, at hide and seek with Apostle John. When the moonbeams right through the windows go, where the 12 are standing in glorious show, she says the rest of them do not stir, but one comes down to play with her. Then I can go where I list and weep, for good St. John my child will keep. Thy beauty filleth the very air, never saw I woman so fair. Come if thou darest, and sit by my side, but do not touch me, or woe will betide. Alas, I am weak, and I might well know the gladness betokes some further woe. Yet comes, it will come, I will bear it, I can, for thou lovest me yet, though but as a man. The knight dismounted in earnest speed, away through the tombstones thundered the steed. and fell by the outer wall and died. But the night he kneeled by the lady's side, kneeled beside him in wondrous bliss, wrapped in everlasting kiss, though never his lips come the lady nigh, and his eyes alone on her beauty lie. All the night long till the cock crew loud, he kneeled by the lady, lapped in her shroud. And when they said, I may not say, dead night was sweeter than living day, how she made him so blissful glad who made her, and found her so ghostly sad, I may not tell, but it needs no touch to make them blessed who love so much. Come every night, my ghost, to me, and one night I will come to thee. 'Tis good to have a ghostly wife. She will not tremble at clang or of strife. She will only hearken amid the din, behind the door if he cometh in. And this is how Sir Aglovale often walked in the moonlight pale, and oft when the crescent but thinned the gloom, full-orbed moonlit filled his room, and through beneath his chamber door fell a ghostly gleam on the outer floor. And they that passed in fear averred, that murmured words they often heard. 'Twas then that the eastern crescent shone through the chancel window, when good St. John played with the ghost child all the night, and the mother was free till the morning light, and sped through the dawning day to stay with Alglaive till the break of day. And their love was a rapture lone and high, and dumb as a moon in the topmost sky. One night Sir Aglovale weary slept and dreamed a dream wherein he wept. Where he was, not often wept he, but this night he wept full bitterly. He woke, beside him the ghost girl shone, out of the dark. 'Twas the eve of St. John. He had dreamed a dream of still dark wood, where the maiden of old beside him stood. But a mist came down and caught her away, and he sought her in vain through the pathless day, till he wept with a grief that can do no more, and thought he had dreamed the dream before. From bursting heart the weeping flowed on, and lo, beside him the ghost girl shone like the light on a harbor's breast, over the sea of his dreams are unrest, shone like the wondrous nameless boon that the heart seeks ever, ever, the heart seeks ever, night or noon. Warnings forgotten when needing most, he clasped to his bosom the radiant ghost. She wailed aloud and faded and sank, with upturned white face, cold and blank. In his arms lay the corpse of the maiden pale, and she came no more to Sir Aglovale. Only a voice, when winds were wild, sobbed and wailed like a child weepin'. Alas, how easily things go wrong, a sigh too much or a kiss too long, and there follows a mist and a weeping rain, and life is never the same again. This was one of the simpler of her songs, which perhaps is the cause of my being able to remember it better than most of the others. While she sung, I was in Elysium, with the sense of a rich soul upholding, embracing, and overhanging mine, full of all plenty and bounty. I felt as if she could give me everything I wanted, as if I should never wish to leave her, but would be content to be sung and fed by her day after day as years rolled by. At last I fell asleep, she sang. When I awoke, I knew not whether it was night or day. The fire had sunk into a few red embers, which gave light enough to show me the woman standing a few feet from me, with her back toward me, facing the door from which I entered. She was weeping, very gently and plentifully. The tears seemed to come freely from her heart. Thus she stood for a few minutes. Then, slowly turning at right angles to her former position, she faced another of the four sides of the cottage. I now observed for the first time that here was a door likewise, and that indeed there was one in the center of every side of the cottage. When she looked towards the second door, her tears ceased to flow, but sighs took their place. She often closed her eyes as she stood, and every time she closed her eyes, a gentle sigh seemed to be born in her heart, and to escape her at her lips. But when her eyes were open, her sighs were deep and very sad, and shook her whole frame. Then she turned towards the third door, and a cry as of fear or suppressed pain broke from her. but she seemed to hearten herself again against the dismay, and to front it steadily, for although I often heard a slight cry and sometimes a moan, yet she never moved or bent her head, and I felt sure that her eyes never closed. Then she turned to the fourth door, and I saw her shudder, and then stand still as a statue, till at last she turned upwards and approached the fire. I saw that her face was white as death, but she gave one look upwards, and smiled the sweetest, most child-innocent smile, then heaped fresh wood on the fire, and sitting down by the blaze, drew her wheel near her, and began to spin. While she spun, she murmured a long, strange song to which the hum of the wheel made a kind of infinite symphony. At length, she paused in her spinning and singing, and glanced towards me, like a mother who looks whether or not her child gives signs of waking. She smiled. When she saw that my eyes were open, I asked whether it was day yet. She answered, "It is always day here, so long as I keep my fire burning." I felt wonderfully refreshed, and a great desire to see more of the island awoke within me. I rose, and saying that I wished to look about me, went towards the door by which I had entered. "Stay a moment," said my hostess, some trepidation in her voice. "Listen to me. You will not see what you expect when you go out of that door. Only remember this. Whenever you wish to come back to me, enter wherever you see this mark." She held up her left hand between me and the fire. Upon the palm, which appeared almost transparent, I saw in dark red a mark like this, which I took care to fix in my mind. It's in the book, it's printed, it's like a line with an arrow pointing to the right. She then kissed me and bade me goodbye with a solemnity that awed me, and bewildered me too, seeing I was only going out for a little rambling in an island, which I did not believe larger, that could easily be encompassed in a few hours' walk at most. As I went, she resumed her spinning. I opened the door and stepped out. The moment my foot touched the smooth sward, I seemed to issue from the door of an old barn on my father's estate, where in the hot afternoons I used to go and lie amongst the straw and read. It seemed to me now that I had been asleep there. At a little distance in the field, I saw two of my brothers at play. The moment they caught sight of me, they called out to me and joined them, which I did, and we played together as we had done years ago, till the red sun went down in the west and grey fog began to rise from the river. Then we went home together, with a strange happiness. As we went, we heard the continually renewed larum of a landrail in the long grass. One of my brothers and I separated a little distance, and each commenced running towards the part whence the sound appeared to come, in the hope of approaching the spot where the bird was, and so getting at least a sight of it, if we should not be able to capture the little creature. My father's voice called us from the trampling down the rich long grass, soon to be cut down and laid aside for the winter. I had quite forgotten all about Fairyland, and the wonderful old woman and the curious red mark. My favorite brother and I shared the same bed. Some childish dispute arose between us, and our last words ere we fell asleep were not of kindness, notwithstanding the pleasures of the day. When I woke in the morning, I missed him. He had risen early and had gone to bathe in the river. Now another hour he is brought home drowned. Alas, alas, if we had only gone to sleep as usual, the one with his arm about the other. Amidst the horror of the moment, a strange conviction flashed across my mind, and I had gone through the very same once before. I rushed to the house, I knew not why, sobbing and crying bitterly. I ran through the fields in aimless distress, till, passing the old barn, I caught sight of a red mark on the door. The merest trifles sometimes rivet the attention in the deepest misery. The intellects has so little to do with grief. I went up to look at this mark, which I did not remember ever to have seen before. As I looked at it, I thought I would go in and lie amongst the straw, for I was very weary with running about and weeping, and I opened the door, and there in the cottage the old woman, as I had left her at her spinning wheel. "I did not expect you to come quite so soon," she said, and I shut the door behind me. I went up to the couch and threw myself on it. That fatigue wherein one wakes from a feverish dream of hopeless grief The old one sang, "The great sun benighted may faint from the sky, but love, once uplighted, will never more die. Form with its brightness from eyes will depart. It walketh in whiteness the halls of the heart." Ere she had ceased singing, my courage had returned. I stirred up from the couch, and without taking leave of the old woman, opened the door of sighs and sprang into what should appear. I stood in a lordly hall, where by a blazing fire on the hearth sat a lady weeping. I knew for someone long desired. A mirror was near me, but I saw that my form had no place within its depth, so I feared not that I should be seen. The lady wonderfully resembled my marble lady, but was altogether of the daughters of men, and I could not tell whether or not it was she. It was not for me she waited. The tramp of a great horse rang through the court without. It ceased, and the clang of armor told that its rider alighted, and the sound of his ringing heels approached the hall. The door opened, and the lady waited, for she would meet her lord alone. He strode in. She flew like a homebound dove into his arms and nestled on the hard steel. It was the knight of the soiled armor, but now the armor shone like polished glass. And strange to tell, though the armor reflected not my form, I saw a dim shadow of myself in the shining steel. "Oh, my beloved, thou art come, and I am blessed." Her soft fingers speedily overcame the hard clasp of his helmet. One by one she undid the buckles of his armor, and she toiled under the weight of the mail, as she would carry it inside. Then she unclasped his greaves and unbuckled his spurs, and once more she sprang into his arms, and he laid her head where she could now feel the beating of his heart. Then she disengaged herself from his embrace, and back a step or two gazed at him. He stood there, a mighty form, crowned with a noble head, where all sadness had disappeared or had been absorbed in a solemn purpose. Yet I suppose that he looked more thoughtful than the lady had expected to see him, for she did not renew her caresses, although his face glowed with love, and the few words he spoke were as mighty deeds for strength. But she led him towards the hearth, and seated him in an ancient chair, and set wine before him, and sat at his feet. "I am sad," he said, "when I think of the youth whom I met twice in the forests of Fairyland, and who, you say twice, with his songs roused you from the death sleep of an evil enchantment. There was something noble in him, but it was a nobleness of thought, and not of deed. He may yet perish of vile fear." "Ah," returned the lady, "you saved him once, and for that I thank you, for may I not say that I somewhat loved him? But tell me how you fared when you struck your battle-axe into the ash tree, and he came and found you, for so much of the story you had told me, when the beggar child came and took you away." "Soon as I saw him," rejoined the knight, "I knew that earthly arms availed not against such as he, and that my soul must meet him in its naked strength. So I unclasped my helm and flung it on the ground, and holding my good axe yet in my hand, gazed at him with steady eyes. On he came, a horror indeed, but I did not flinch. Endurance must conquer where force could not reach. He came nearer and nearer till the ghastly face was close to mine. A shudder as of death ran through me, but I think I did not move, for he seemed to quail and retreated. As soon as he gave back, I struck one more sturdy blow on the stem of his tree, that the forest rang, and then looked at him again. He writhed and grinned with rage and apparent pain, and again approached me, but retreated sooner than before. I heeded him no more, but hewed with a will at the tree, till the trunk creaked and the head bowed, and with a crash it fell to the earth. Then I looked up from my labor, and lo, the spectre had vanished, and I saw him no more, nor ever in my wanderings have I heard of him again. "Well struck, well withstood, my hero," said the lady. "But," said the knight, somewhat troubled, "dost thou love the youth still?" "Ah," she replied, "how can I help it? He awoke me from worse than death. He loved me. I had never been for thee if he not sought me first. But I love him not as I love thee. He was but the moon of my night, and thou art the sun of my day, O beloved." "Thou art right," returned the nobleman. "It were hard indeed not to have some love in return for such a gift as he hath given thee. I too owe him more than words can speak." Humbled before them with an aching and desolate heart, I yet could not restrain my words. Let me then be the moon of thy night still, O woman, and when thy days beclouded as the fairest days will be, let some song of mine comfort thee as an old withered half-forgotten thing that belongs to an ancient mournful hour of uncompleted birth, which yet was beautiful in its time. They sat silent, and I almost thought they were listening. The color of the lady's eyes grew deeper and deeper. The slow tears grew and filled them and overflowed. They rose and passed hand in hand, close to where I stood, and each looked toward me in passing. Then they disappeared through a door which closed behind them. But ere it closed, I saw that the room into which it opened was a rich chamber hung with glorious arras. I stood with an ocean of sighs frozen in my bosom. I could remain no longer. She was near me, and I could not see her. Near me in the arms of one loved better than I, and I would not see her, and I would not be by her. But how to escape from the nearness of the best beloved? I had not this time forgotten the mark, for the fact that I could not enter the sphere of these living beings kept me aware that, for me, I moved in a vision, while they moved in life. I looked all about for the mark, but could see it nowhere, for I avoided looking just where it was. There the dull cipher glowed on the very door of their secret chamber. Struck with agony, I dashed it open, and fell at the feet of the ancient woman, who still spun on the whole dissolved ocean of my sighs bursting from me in a storm of tearless sobs. Where I fainted or slept, I do not know, but I returned to consciousness before I seemed to have powers to move. I heard the woman singing, and could distinguish the words. O light of dead and of dying days, O love, in thy glory go, in a rosy mist and a moony haze, o'er the pathless peaks of snow. But what is left for the cold grey soul that moans like a wounded dove? One wine is left in the broken bowl, 'tis to love and love and love. Now I could weep. When she saw me weeping, she sang, better to sit at the water's birth than a sea of waves to win, to live in the love that floweth forth than the love that cometh in. Be thy heart a well of love, my child, flowing and free and sure, for a cistern of love, though undefiled, keeps not the spirit pure. I rose from the earth, loving the white lady as I had never loved her before. Then I walked up to the door of dismay and opened it, and went out, and lo, I came forth upon a crowded street, where men and women went to and fro in multitudes. I knew it well, and turning to one hand, walked sadly along the pavement. Suddenly I saw approaching me a little way off the form well known to me, well known. Alas, how weak the word, and the years when I thought my boyhood was left behind, and shortly before I entered the fairyland, wrong and sorrow had gone together, hand in hand, as it is well they do. Unchangeably dear was that face. It lay in my heart as a child lies in its own white bed, but I could not meet her. Anything but that, I said. Side sprang up in the steps to a door in which I fancied I saw the mystic sign. I entered, not the mysterious cringe, but her home. I rushed wildly on and stood by the door of her room. She is out, I said. I will see the old room once more. I opened the door gently and stood in a great solemn church. A deep-toned bell whose sounds throbbed and echoed and swam through the empty building struck the hour of midnight. The moon shone through the windows of the clerestory, and enough of the ghostly radiance was diffused through the church to let me see, walking with a stately yet somewhat trailing and stumbling step down the opposite aisle, for I stood in one of the transports, a figure dressed in a white robe. Whether for the night or for that longer night which lies too deep for the day, I could not tell. Was it she? And was this her chamber? I crossed the church and followed. The figure stopped, seemed to ascend as it were a high bed, and lay down. I reached the place where it lay, glimmering white. The bed was a tomb. The light was too ghostly to see clearly, but I passed my hand over the face and the hands and the feet, which were all bare. They were cold, they were marble, but I knew them. It grew dark. I turned to retrace my steps, but found ere long that I had wandered into what seemed a little chapel. I groped about, seeking the door. Everything I touched belonged to the dead. My hands fell on the cold effigy of a knight who lay with his legs crossed, and his sword broken beside him. He lay in his noble rest, and I lived on in ignoble strife. I felt for the left hand and a certain finger, and I found there the ring I knew. He was one of my own ancestors. I was in the chapel over the burial vault of my race. I called aloud, "If any of the dead are moving here, let them take pity upon me, for I, alas, am still alive. And let some dead woman comfort me, for I am a stranger in the land of the dead and see no light." A warm kiss alighted on my lips through the dark, and I said, "The dead kiss well, I will not be afraid." And a great hand was reached out from the dark, and grasped mine for a moment, mightily and tenderly. I said to myself, "The veil between, though very dark, is very thin." Groping my way further, I stumbled over the heavy stone that covered the entrance of the vault, and in stumbling, descried on the stone of the mark glowing in red fire. I caught the red ring. All my efforts be moved. My effort could not have moved the huge slab, but it opened the door of the cottage, and I threw myself once more, pale and speechless, as the couch beside the ancient dame. She sang once more, "Thou dreamest on a rock thou art, thou dreamest. On a rock thou art, high over the broken wave. Thou fallest in with a fearful start, but not into thy grave, for waking in the morning's light, thou smilest at the vanished night. So wilt thou sink, all pale and dumb, into the fainting gloom, but ere the coming terrors come, thou wakest, where's the tomb? Thou wakest, the dead ones smile above, with hovering arms of sleepless love." She paused and sang again, "We weep for gladness, weep for grief. The tears, they are the same. We sigh for longing and relief. The sighs have but one name, and mingled in the dying strife are moans that are not sad. The pangs of death are the throbs of life. Its sighs are sometimes glad. The face is very strange and white. It is earth's only spot that feebly flickers back the light the living seeth not." I fell asleep, and slept a dreamless sleep, for I know not how long. When I awoke, I found that my hostess had moved from where she had been sitting, and now sat between me and the fourth door. I guessed that her design was to prevent my entering there. I sprang from the couch, and dared past her to the door. I opened it at once and went out. All I remember is a cry of distress from the woman. "Don't go there, child. Don't go there." But I was gone. I know nothing more, or if I did, I had forgotten it all when I woke to consciousness, lying on the floor of the cottage, with my head in the lap of the woman, who was weeping over me and stroking my hair with both hands, talking to me as a mother might talk to a sick and sleeping child, or a dead child to a sick and sleeping, or a dead child. As soon as I looked and saw her, she smiled through her tears, smiled with withered face and young eyes, till her countenance was irradiated with the light with a smile. Then she bathed my head and face and hands in an icy cold, colorless liquid, which smelt a little of damp earth. Immediately I was able to sit up. She rose and put some food before me. When I had eaten, she said, "Listen to me, my child. You must leave directly." "Leave you," I said. "So happy with you. I never was so happy in my life." "You must go," she rejoined sadly. "Listen, what do you hear?" "I hear the sound as of a great throbbing of water." "You do hear it? Well, I had to go through the door of the timeless," and she shuddered as she pointed to the fourth door, "to find you. For if I had not gone, you would have never entered again. And because I went, the waters around my cottage will rise and flow and come, till they built a great firmament of waters over my dwelling. But as long as I keep my fire burning, they cannot enter. I have fuel enough for years, and after 1 year they will sink away again, and be just as they were before you came. I have not been buried for 100 years now." She smiled and wept. "Alas," I cried, "I have brought this evil on the best and kindest of friends who has filled my heart with great gifts." "Do not think of that," she rejoined. "I can bear it very well. You will come back to me some day, I know, but I beg you, for his sake, my dear child, do one thing. And whatever sorrow you may be, however inconsolable and Irred- irredeemable, irremediable it may appear. Believe believe me that the old woman in the cottage with the young eyes and she smiled knows something, though she must not always tell, that it would quite satisfy you about it, even in the worst moments of your distress. Now you must go. How can I go if the waters are all about, and if all the doors lead into other regions and other worlds? This is not an island, she replied, but is joined to the land by a narrow neck, and for the door I will lead you myself through the right one. She took my hand, and led me through the third door, whereupon I found myself standing in the deep grassy turf on which I had landed from the little boat. But upon the opposite side of the cottage, she pointed out the direction I must take to find the isthmus and escape the rising waters. Then, putting arms around me, she held me to her bosom, and as I kissed her, I felt as if I were leaving my mother for the first time, could not help weeping bitterly. At length, she gently pushed me away, and with the words, "Go, my son, and do something worth doing," turned back and entered the college, closed the door behind her. I felt very desolate as I went. Okay. Chapter 20. Thou hadst no fame, that, that which thou didst like good, was but thy appetite that swayed thy blood, for that time to be to the best. For as a blast, that through a house comes usually doth cast things out of order, yet by chance may come, and blow some one thing to his proper room, so did thy appetite, and not thy zeal, sway thee by chance to do some other one thing well. Fletcher's Faithful Shepherdess. The noble heart that harbors virtuous thought, and is with child of glorious great intent, can never rest until it forth have brought the eternal brood of glory excellent. Spenser, the Faerie Queen. I had not gone very far before I felt that the turf between my feet was soaked with the rising waters, but I reached the isthmus in safety. It was rocky, and so much higher than the level of the peninsula that I had plenty of time to cross. I saw on each side of me the water rising rapidly, altogether without wind or violent motion or broken waves. But, as if a slow, strong fire were glowing beneath it, ascending a steep acclivity, I found myself at last in an open, rocky country. After traveling for some hours, as nearly in a straight line as I could, I arrived at a lonely tower, built on the top of a little hill, which overlooked the whole neighboring country. As I expected, I heard the clang of an anvil, and so rapid were the blows that I despaired of making myself heard till a pause in the work should ensue. It was some minutes before a cessation took place, but when it did, I knocked loudly, and had not long to wait, for a moment after the door was partly opened by a noble-looking youth, half undressed, glowing with heat, and begrimed with the blackness of the forge. In one hand he held a sword so lately from the furnace that it yet shone with a dull fire. As soon as he saw me, he threw the door wide open, and standing aside invited me very cordially to enter. I did so, when he shut and bolted the door most carefully, and then led the way inwards. He brought me into a rude hall, which seemed to occupy almost the whole of the ground floor of the little tower, and which I saw was now being used as a workshop. A huge fire roared on the hearth, beside which was an anvil, but by the anvil stood, in similar undress, and in waiting attitude, hammer in hand, a second youth, tall as the former, but far more slightly built, reversing the usual course of perception in such meetings. I thought them at first sight very unlike, and the second glance knew that they were brothers. The former, apparently the elder, was muscular and dark, with curling hair and large hazel eyes, which sometimes grew wondrously soft. The second was slender and fair, yet with a countenance like an eagle, and an eye which, though pale blue, shone with an almost fierce expression. He stood erect as if looking from a lofty mountain crag over a vast plain outstretched below. As soon as we entered the hall, the elder turned to me, and I saw that a glow of satisfaction shone on both their faces. To my surprise and great pleasure, he addressed me thus. Brother, will you sit by this fire and rest, till we finish this part of our work? I signified my assent, and resolved to await any disclosure they might be inclined to make, seated myself in silence near the hearth. The elder brother then laid the sword in the fire, covered it well over, and when it attained a sufficient degree of heat, drew it out and laid it on the anvil, moving it carefully about, while the younger, with a succession of quick smart blows, appeared either to be welding it or hammering one part of it to a consenting shape with the rest. Having finished, they laid it quickly in the fire, and when it was very hot indeed, plunged it into a vessel full of some liquid, whence a blue flame sprang upwards as the glowing steel entered. There they left it, and drawing 2 stools to the fire, sat down one on each side of me. We're very glad to see you, brother. Been expecting you for some days, said the dark-haired youth. I'm proud to be called your brother, I rejoined. And you will not think I refuse the name if I desire to know what you honor me with it. Ah, that he does not know about it, said the younger. We thought you had known of the bond betwixt us and the work we had to do together. You must tell him, brother, from the first. So the elder began. Our father is king of this country. Before we were born, 3 giant brothers had appeared in the land. No one knew exactly when, and no one had the least idea where they came. They took possession of a ruined castle that had stood unchanged and unoccupied with the memory of any of the country people. The vaults of this castle had remained uninjured by time, and these, I presume, they made use of at first. They were rarely seen and never offered the least injury to anyone, so they were regarded in the neighborhood as at least perfectly harmless, if not rather benevolent beings. Mm-hmm. Sorry, I forgot to shake a pill. But it began to be observed that the old castle had assumed somehow or other, no one knew what or how, a somewhat different look from what it used to have. Not only were several breaches in the early part of the walls built up, but actually some of the battlements which yet stood had been repaired, apparently to prevent them from falling into worse decay, while the more important parts were being restored. Of course, everyone supposed that giants have had a hand in the work, but no one ever saw them engaged in it. The peasants became yet more uneasy after one who had concealed himself and watched all night in the neighborhood of the castle reported that he had seen in full moonlight the 3 huge giants working with might and main all night long, restoring to their former positions some massive stones, formerly steps of a great turnpike stair, a great portion of which had long since fallen, along with part of the wall of the round tower in which had been built. This wall they were completing foot by foot, along with the stair, but the people said they had no just pretext for interfering, although the real reason for letting the giants alone was that everybody was far too much afraid of them to interrupt them. At length, with the help of a neighboring quarry, the whole of the external wall of the castle was finished, and now the country folks were in greater fear than before. But for several years the giants remained peaceful. The reason of this was afterwards supposed to be the fact that they were distantly related to several good people in the country. For as long as these lived, they remained quiet. But as soon as they were all dead, the real nature of the giants broke out. Having completed the outside of their castle, they proceeded, by spoiling the country houses around them, to make quite luxurious provisions for their comfort within. Affairs reached such a pass that the news of their robberies came to my father's ears, but he, alas, was so crippled in his resources by a war he was carrying on with the neighboring prince, that he could only spare a few men to attempt the capture of their stronghold. Upon these giants issued in the night, and slew every man of them, and now grown bolder by the success and impunity. They no longer confined their depredations to property, but began to seize the persons of their distinguished neighbors, knights and ladies, and hold them in durance, the misery of which was heightened by all the manner of indignity, until they were redeemed by their friends at an exorbitant ransom. Many knights have adventured their overthrow, but to their own instead, for they have all been slain or captured or forced to make a hasty retreat. To crown their enormities, if any man now attempt their destruction, they immediately, upon his defeat, put one or more of their captives to a shameful death on a turret in sight of all passers-by, so that they have been much less molested of late. And although we have burned for years to attack these demons to destroy them, dare not, for the sake of their captives, risk the adventure. Before we should have... Sorry. Before we should have reached at least our earliest manhood. Now, however, we are preparing for the attempt, and the grounds of this preparation are these. Having only the resolution and not the experience necessary for the undertaking, we went and consulted a lonely woman of wisdom, who lives not very far from here, in the direction of the quarter from which you have come. She received us most kindly and gave us what seems to be the best of advice. She first inquired what experience we had in arms. We told her we had been well exercised from our boyhood, and for some years had kept ourselves in constant practice with a view to this necessity. But you have not actually fought for life and death, she said. We were forced to confess we had not. So much the better in some respects, he replied. Now listen to me. Go first and work with an armorer for as long a time as you find needed to obtain a knowledge of his craft, which will not be long. Seizing your hearts will be all in the work. Then, go to some lonely tower, you two alone. Receive no visits from man or woman. There forge for yourselves every piece of armor that you wish to wear, or use in your coming encounter, and keep up your exercises. As, however, two of you be no match for the three giants, I will find you, if I can, a third brother. We will take it on himself for the third share of the fight and preparations. Indeed, I've already seen someone who I will be the very man for your fellowship, but it will be some time before he comes. He is wandering now without a name. I will show him to you in a glass, and when he comes you will know him at once. If he will share your endeavors, you must teach him all you know, and he will repay you well, in present song and in future deeds. She opened the door of the old cabinet that stood in the room. On the inside of the door was an old conch mirror. Looking for some time, we at length saw reflected the place wherein we stood, and the dame seated in our chair. Our forms were not reflected, but the feet of the dame lay a young man yourself. Weeping. Surely this youth will not serve our ends, I said, for he weeps. The old woman sighed. Past years are present strength, said she. My brother, I saw you weep once over an eagle you shot. That was because it was so like you, brother. But indeed, this youth may have better cause for tears than that. I was wrong. Wait a while, said the woman. Mistake it not. He will make you weep till your tears are dry forever. Tears are the only cure for weeping, and you may have need of the cure. Before you go to fight the giants, you must wait for him in your tower till he comes. Okay, we gotta do an ad break. So we're gonna do that, and we'll be right back. Okay, we back. Switch back the tracks. Okay. There. Okay. Okay. Uh. Now. Now, if you will join us, we'll soon teach you to make your armor, and we'll fight together and work together, and love each other as never three loved before. And you will sing to us, will you not? That I will when I can, I answered. But it is only at times when the power of song comes upon me. For that I must wait, but I have a feeling that if I work well, song will not be far off to enliven the labor. This was all the compact made. The brothers required nothing more, and I did not think of giving anything more. I rose and threw off my upper garments. I know the uses of the sword, I said. I'm ashamed of my white hands beside yours so nobly soiled and hard, but that shame will soon be wiped away. No, no, we will not work today. Rest is as needful as toil. Bring the wine, brother. It is your turn to serve today. The younger brother soon covered our table with rough viands, but good wine, and we ate and drank heartily. Beside our work, before the meal was over, I had learned their story. Each had something in his heart which made the conviction that he would victoriously perish in the upcoming conflict a real sorrow to him. Otherwise, they thought they would have lived enough. The cause of their troubles were respectively these: while they wrought with an armor in a city famed for workmanship in steel and silver, the elder had fallen in love with a lady as far beneath him in royal rank that she was above the station he had as apprentice to an armorer. Nor did he seek to further his suit by discovering himself, but there was simply so much manhood about him that no one ever thought of rank when in his company. This was what her brother said about it. The lady could not help loving him in return. He told her, when he left her, that he had a perilous adventure before him, and that when it was achieved, she would either see him return to claim her, or hear that he had died with honor. The younger brother's grief arose from the fact that if they were both slain, his old father, the king, would be childless. His love for his father was so exceeding that, to one unable to sympathize with it, it would have appeared extravagant. Both loved him equally at heart, but the love of the younger had been more developed, because his thoughts and anxieties had not been otherwise occupied. When at home, he had been his constant companion, and of late he had ministered to the infirmities of his growing age. The youth was never weary of listening to the tales of his sire's youthful adventures, and had not yet in the smallest degree lost the conviction that his father was the greatest man in the world. The grandest triumph possible to his conception was to return to his father, laden with the spoils of one of the hated giants. But they both were in some dread, lest the thought of the loneliness of these two might occur to them. In the moment when decision was most necessary and disturb it in some degree, the self-possession required for the success of their attempt. For as I have said, they were yet untried in actual conflict. Now, thought I see to what the powers of my gift must minister. For my own part, I did not dread death, for I had nothing to care to live for, but I dreaded the encounter because of the responsibility connected with it. They resolved, however, to work hard and thus grow cool, and quick and forceful. The time passed away in work and song, in talk and ramble, in friendly fight and brotherly aid. I would not forge for myself armor of heavy mail like theirs, for I was not so powerful as they, and depended more for any success I might secure upon nimbleness of motion, certainty of eye, and ready response of hand. Therefore, I began to make for myself a shirt of steel, plates and rings, which work, while more troublesome, was better suited to me than the heavier labor. Much assistance to the brothers give me, even after, by their instructions, I was able to make some progress alone. Their work was in a moment abandoned, to render any required aid to mine. As the old woman had promised, I tried to repay them with song, and many were the tears they both shed over my ballads and dirges. The songs they liked best to hear were two which I made for them. They were not half so good as many others I knew, especially some I had learned from the wise woman in the cottage. But what comes nearest to our needs we like the best. The king sat on his throne, glowing in gold and red. The crown in his right hand shone, the gray hairs crowned his head. His only son walks in walls of steel he stands. Make me, O father, strong to win, with the blessing of holy hands. He knelt before his sire, who blessed him with feeble smile. His eyes shone out with a kingly fire, but his old lips quivered the while. Go to fight, my son, bring back the giant's head, and the crown with which my brows have done shall glitter on thine instead. My father, I seek no crowns, but unspoken praise from thee. For thy people's good and thy renown I will die to set them free. The king sat down and waited there, and rose not night nor day, till a sound of shouting filled the air, and cries of sore dismay. Then like a king he sat once more, with a crown upon his head, and up the throne the people bore a mighty giant dead. And up to the throne the people bore a pale and lifeless boy. The king rose up like a prophet of yore, in a lofty death-like joy. He put the crown on the chilly brow. Thou shouldst have reigned with me, but death is the king of both, and now I go to obey with thee. Surely some good in me there lay, to beget the noble one. The old man smiled like a winter day, and fell beside his son. O lady, thy lover is dead, they cried. He is dead, but hath slain the foe. He hath left his name to be magnified in a song of wonder and woe. Alas, I am well repaid, said she, with a pain that stings like joy, for I feared from his tenderness to me that he was but a feeble boy. But now I shall hold my head on high, the queen among my kind. For ye hear a sound, 'tis only a sigh for a glory left behind. The first 3 times I sang these songs, they both wept passionately, but after the 3rd time they wept no more. Their eyes shone and their faces grew pale, but they never wept at any of my songs again. Chapter 21. I put my life in my hands. The Book of Judges. At length, with much toil and equal delight, my armor was finished. We armed each other, and tested the strength of defense with many blows of loving force. I was inferior in strength to both my brothers, but a little more agile than either, and upon this agility, joined to precision in hitting with the point of my weapon, I grounded my hopes of success in combat. I likewise labored to develop yet more keenness of sight, which I was naturally gifted, and from the remarks of my companions I soon learned that my endeavors were not in vain. The morning arrived in which we had determined to make the attempt, and succeed or perish. Perhaps both. We had resolved to fight on foot, knowing that the mishap of many of the knights who had made the attempt had resulted from the fright of their horses at the appearance of giants, and believing with Sir Gawain that though mere sons might be false to us, the earth would never prove a traitor. But most of our preparations were, in their immediate aim at least, frustrated. We rose that till morning by daybreak. We had rested from all labor the day before, and now were refreshed as the lark. We bathed in the cold spring water, and dressed ourselves in clean garments with a sense of preparation, as for a solemn festivity. When we had broken our fast, I took an old lyre which I had found in the tower, and had myself repaired, and sung for the last time the two ballads of which I had said so much already. I followed them with this for a closing song. A will for him who breaks his dream with the blow that ends the strife, and waking knows the peace that flows around the pain of life. We are dead, my brothers, our bodies clasped as an armor our souls about. This hand is the battle grips, this hand in the battle axe I grasp, and this my hammer stout. Fear not, my brothers, for we are dead. No noise can break our rest. The calm of the grave is about the head, and the heart heaves not the breast. And our life we throw to our people back to live with a further store. We leave it them that there be no lack in the land where we live no more. A well for him who breaks his dream with the blow that ends the strife, and walks and what waking knows the peace that flows around the noise of life. At the last few tones of the instrument were following like a dirge the death of the song. We all sprang to our feet, for through one of the little windows of the tower towards which I looked as I sung, I saw suddenly, rising over the edge of the slope on which our tower stood, three enormous heads. The brothers knew at once by looks what caused my sudden movement. We were utterly unarmed, and there was no time to arm. But we seemed to adopt the same solution simultaneously, for each caught up his favorite weapon, and having his defense behind, sprang to the door. I snatched up a long rapier, abruptly, but very finely pointed, in my sword hand, and in the other a saber. The elder brother seized his heavy battle axe, and the younger a great two-handed sword, which he wielded in one hand like a feather. We had just time to get clear of the tower, embrace and say goodbye, and part to some distance, that we might not encumber each other's motions, ere the triple giant brotherhood drew near to attack us. They were about twice our height, and armed to the teeth. Through the visors of their helmets, their monstrous eyes shone with a horrible ferocity. I was in the middle position, and the middle giant approached me. My eyes were busy with his armor, and I was not a moment settling my mode of attack. I saw that his bonner was somewhat clumsily made, and that the overlappings in the lower part had more play than necessary, and I hoped that, in a fortunate moment, some joint would open a little in a visible and accessible part. I stood till he came near enough to aim a blow at me with the mace, which had been in all ages the favorite weapon of giants, when, of course, I leaped aside and let the blow fall upon the spot where I had been standing. I expected this would strain the joints of his armor yet more. Full of fury, he made at me again, but I kept him busy, constantly eluding his blows and hoping thus to fatigue him. He did not seem to fear any assault from me, and I attempted none as yet. But while I watched his motions in order to avoid his blows, I at the same time kept equal watch upon those joints of his armor, through some one of which I hoped to reach his life. At length, as if somewhat fatigued, he paused a moment, and drew himself slightly up. I bounded forward, foot in hand, ran my rapier right through to the armor of his back, let go the hilt, passing under his right arm, turned as he fell, and flew at him with my saber. At one happy blow I divided the band of his helmet, which fell off, and allowed me with a second cut across the eyes to blind him. After which I clove his head, and turned uninjured, to see how my brothers had fared. Both the giants were down, but so were my brothers. I flew first to the one, and then to the other couple. Both pairs of combatants were dead, and yet locked together as in a death struggle. The elder had buried his battle-axe in the body of his foe, and had fallen behind him as he fell. The giant had strangled him with it in his own death agonies. The younger had nearly hewn off the left leg of his enemy, and grappled within the act, had, while they rolled together on the earth, found for his dagger a passage between the gorget and cuirass of the giant, and stabbed him mortally in the throat. The blood from the giant's throat was yet pouring over the hand of his foe, which, still grasping the hilt of their sheathed in the wound, they lay silent. I, the least worthy, remained the sole survivor in the lists. Hi, Austin, welcome on in. As I stood exhausted amidst the dead, after the first worthy deed of my life, I suddenly looked behind me, and there lay the shadow, black in the sunshine. I went to the lonely tower, and there lay the useless armor of the noble youths, supine as they. How sad it looked! It was a glorious death, but it was death. My song could not comfort me now. I was almost ashamed that I was alive, when they, the true-hearted, were no more. And yet I breathed free to think that I had gone through the trial, and had not failed, and perhaps I may be forgiven, if some feelings of pride arose in my bosom, when I looked down on the form mighty that lay dead by my hand. After all, however, I said to myself, and my heart sank, it was only skill. Your giant was a blunderer. I left the bodies of my friends and foes peacefully enough when the death fight was over, and hastening to the country below roused the peasants. They came with shout and in gladness, bringing wagons to carry the bodies, a resolve to take the princes home to their father, each as he lay in the arms of his country's foe. But first I searched the giants, and found the keys of their castle, to which I repaired, followed by a great company of people. It was a place of wonderful strength. I released the prisoners, knights and ladies, all in a sad condition, from the cruelties and neglects of the giants. It humbled me to see them crowding around me with thanks, when in truth the glorious brothers lying dead by their lonely tower were those to whom the thanks belonged. I had but aided in carrying out the thought born in their brain, and uttered in invisible form before ever I laid hold thereupon. Yet I did count myself happy to have been chosen for their brother in this great deed. After a few hours spent in refreshing and clothing the prisoners, we all commenced our journey towards the capital. This was slow at first, but as the strength and spirits of the prisoners returned, it became more rapid, and in 3 days we reached the palace of the king. As we entered the city gates, with the huge bulks lying each on the wagon drawn by horses, and 2 of them inextricably intertwined with the dead bodies of their princes, the people raised a shout and then a cry, and followed in multitude the solemn procession. I will not attempt to describe the behavior of the grand old king. Joy and pride in his sons overcame his sorrow at their loss. On me he hanged every kindness that heart could devise or hand execute. He used to sit and question me night after night about everything that was connected with him and their preparations. Our mode of life and relation to each other, during the time we spent together, was a constant theme. He entered into the minutest details of the construction of the armor, even in a peculiar mode of riveting some of the plates, which with unwearying interest. This armor I had intended to beg of the king as my sole memorials of the contest, when I saw the delight he took in contemplating it, and in the consolation it appeared to afford him in his sorrow. I could not ask for it, but at his request left my own, weapons and all, to be joined with theirs in a trophy, erected in the grand square of the palace. The king, with gorgeous ceremony, dubbed me knight with his own old hand, in which trembled the sword of his youth. During the short time I remained, my company was naturally much courted by the young nobles. I was in constant round of gaiety and diversion, notwithstanding that the court was in mourning, for the country was so rejoiced at the death of the giants, since so many of their lost friends had been restored to nobility and men of wealth, that the gladness surpassed the grief. Yet have indeed left your lives to your people and my great brothers, I said. But I was ever and ever haunted by the old shadow, which I had not seen it all the time that I was at work in the tower. Even the society of the ladies of the court, who seemed to think it their only duty to make my stay there as pleasant to me as possible, I could not help being conscious of his presence, although it might not be annoying me at the time. At length, somewhat weary of uninterrupted pleasure, I no wise strengthened thereby, either in body or mind, I put on a splendid suit of armor of steel inlaid with silver, which the old king had given me, and mounting the horse which had been brought to me, took my leave of the palace, to visit the distant city in which the lady dwelt, whom the elder prince had loved. I anticipated a sore task in conveying to her the news of his glorious fate, but this trial was spared me in a manner as strange as anything that had happened to me in Fairyland. Chapter 22. No one has my form but the eye. Trope in Jean Paul's Titan. Joy's a subtle elf. I think man's happiest when he forgets himself. Cyril Tournier, The Revenger's Tragedy. The third day of my journey, I was riding gently along a road, apparently little frequented to judge from the grass that growed upon it. I was approaching a forest. Everywhere in fairyland, forests are the places where one may most certainly expect adventures. As I drew near, a youth, unarmed, gentle, and beautiful, who had just cut a branch from a yew growing on the skirts of the wood, evidently to make himself a bow, met me and then accosted me. Sir Knight, be careful as thou ridest through this forest, for it seems to be strangely enchanted, in a sort which even those who have witness of such enchantment can hardly describe. I thanked him for his advice, which I promised to follow, and rode on. But the moment I entered the wood, it seemed to me that if the enchantment was there, it must be of a good kind, for the shadow, which had been more than usually dark and distressing since I had set out on this journey, suddenly disappeared. I felt a wonderful elevation of spirits, and began to reflect on my past life, and especially on my combat with the giants, with such satisfaction that I had actually to remind myself that I had only killed one of them, and that, but for the brothers, I should never have the idea of attacking them, not to mention the smallest power of sending to him. Still I rejoiced and counted myself among the glorious knights of old, having even the unspeakable presumption, my shame and self-condemnation at the memory of it are such, that I write it as the only and sole penance I can perform, to think of myself, will the world believe it, as side by side with Sir Galahad. Scarcely had the thought been in my brain, when approaching from the left through the trees, I espied a resplendent knight, of mighty size, whose armor seemed to shine of itself, without the sun. When he drew near, I was astonished to see that his armor was like my own. I could trace, line for line, the coarseness of inlaid silver to device on my own. His horse, too, was like mine in color, form, and motion, save that, like his rider, he was greater and fiercer than his counterpart. The knight rode up with Beaver up as he halted right opposite to me in the narrow path, barring my way. I saw the reflection of my countenance in the center plate to the shining steel on his breastplate. Above it rose the same face, his face, only, as I have said, larger and reflection of my countenance in the center plate of the shining steel on his as a breastplate. Of my countenance in the center plate of shining steel on his breastplate. Above it rose the same face, his face, only as I have said, larger and fiercer. I was bewildered. I could not help feeling some admiration of him, but it was mingled with the dim conviction that he was evil, and that I ought to fight with him. Let me pass, I said. When I will, he replied. Something within me said, spear and rest, and ride at him, else thou art forever a slave. I tried, but my arm trembled so much that I could not couch my lance. To tell the truth, I, who had overcome the giant, shook like a coward before this knight. He had a scornful laugh, then echoed through the wood, turned his horse and said, without looking around, "Follow me." I obeyed, abashed and stupefied. How long he led and how long I followed, I cannot tell. I never knew misery before, I said to myself. Would I had at least struck him, and had my death blow in return. Why then do I not call him to wheel and defend himself? Alas, I know not why, but I cannot. One look from him would cow me like a beaten hound. I followed and was silent. At length, we came to a weary square tower in the middle of a dense forest. It looked as if a scarce tree had been cut down to make room for it. Across the very door, diagonally grew the stem of a tree, so large that it were just room to squeeze past in order to enter. One miserable square hole in the roof was the only visible suggestion of a window. Turret or battlement or projecting masonry of any kind it had none. Clear and smoothing massy, it rose from its base, ended with a line straight and unbroken. The roof carried to a center from each of the four walls, rise slightly to the point where the rafters met, Around the base lay several little heaps of either bits of broken branches, withered and peeled, or half-whitened bones. I could not distinguish which as I approached. The ground sounded hollow beneath my horse's hooves. The knight took a great key from his pocket and reached past the stem of the tree with some difficulty opening the door. "Dismount," he commanded, and I obeyed. He turned my horse's head away from the tower, gave him a terrible blow with the flat side of his sword, and sent him madly tearing through the forest. "Now," said he, "enter and take your companion with you." I looked around. Knight and horse had vanished, and behind me lay the horrible shadow. I entered, for I could not help myself, and the shadow followed me. I had a terrible conviction that the knight and he were one. The door closed behind me. Now I was indeed in pitiful plight. There was literally nothing in the tower but my shadow and me. The walls rose up, right up to the roof, in which, as I had seen from without, from without, there was one little square opening. This I now knew to be the only window the tower possessed. I sat down to the floor in listless wretchedness. I think I must have fallen asleep, and have slept for hours, for I suddenly became aware of existence, and observing the moon shining through the hole in the roof. As she rose higher and higher, her light crept down over the wall over me, till at last it shone right upon my head. Instantaneously, the walls of the tower seemed to vanish away like a mist. I sat beneath the beech, on the edge of the forest. An open country lay in the moonlight. For miles and miles around me, spotted with glimmering houses and towers. I thought with myself, joy, it was only a dream. The horrible narrow waste is gone, and I wake beneath a beech tree, perhaps one that loves me, and I can go where I will. I rose as I thought, and wheeled about me, and did what I would, but ever kept me near the tree. For always and of course, since my meeting with the woman at the beech tree, far more than ever, I loved that tree. So the night wore on. I waited for the sun to rise before I could venture to renew my journey. But as soon as the first light of dawn appeared, instead of shining upon me from the eye of morning, it stole like a fainting ghost through the little square hole above my head, and the walls came out as the light gray, and the glorious night was swallowed up for the hateful day. The long dreary day passed. My shadow lay back on the floor. I felt no hunger, no sense of food, no need of food. The night came, the moon shone. I watched her light slowly descending the wall, as I might have watched down the sky the long, swift approach of a helping angel. Her rays touched me, and I was free. Thus night after night passed. I should have died but for this. Every night the conviction returned that I was free. Every morning I sat wretchedly disconsolate. At length, when the course of the moon no longer permitted her beams to touch me, the night was dreary as the day. When I slept, I was somewhat consoled by my dreams, but all the time I dreamed I knew that I was only dreaming. But one night, at length, the moon, a mere shred of pallor, shattered a few thin ghostly rays upon me, and I think I fell asleep and dreamed as I sat in an autumn night before the vintage, or a hill overlooking my own castle. My heart sprang with joy to be a child again, innocent, fearless, without shame or despair. I walked down to the castle. All were in consternation in my absence. My sisters were weeping for my loss. They sprang up and clung to me, with incoherent cries as I entered. My old friends came flocking around me. A gray light shone on the roof of the hall. It was the light of the dawn shining through the square window of my tower. More earnestly than ever, I longed for freedom after this dream. More dearly than ever crept on the next wretched day. I measured by sunbeams, caught through the little window in the trap of my talons how it went by, waiting only for the dreams of the night. Almost noon, I stirred as if something foreign to all my senses and all experiences had suddenly invaded me. Yet it was only the voice of a woman singing. My whole frame quivered with joy, surprise, and the sensation of the unforeseen. Like a living soul, like an incarnation of nature, the song entered my prison house. Each tone folded its wings and laid itself, like a caressing bird, upon my heart. It bathed me like a sea. enwrapped me like an odorous vapor, entered my soul like a long draught of clear spring water, shone upon me like an essential sunlight, soothed me like a mother's voice and hand. Yet as the clearest force well tastes sometimes the bitterness of yeah, decayed leaves, so too my weary prisoned heart. Its cheerfulness had a sting of cold, and its tenderness unmanned me with the faintness of the long-departed joys. I wept half bitterly, half luxuriously, but not long. I dashed away the tears, ashamed of a weakness which I thought I had abandoned. Ere I knew, I had walked to the door and seated myself my ears against it, in order to catch every syllable of the revelation from the unseen outer world, and now I heard each word distinctly. The singer seemed to be standing or sitting near the tower, for the sounds indicated no change of place. The song was something like this. The sun, like a golden knot on high, gathers the glories of the sky, and binds them into a shining tent, roofing the world with the firmament. And through the pavilion the rich winds blow, and through the pavilion the waters go, the birds for joy and the water for and the tree and the birds for joy and the trees for prayer, bowing their heads in the sunny air, and for the thoughts the gently talking springs that come from the center with secret things. All make a music gentle and strong, bound by the heart into one sweet song. And amidst them all the Mother Earth sits with the children of her birth. She tendereth them all as a mother hen, her little one around her 12 or 10. Oft she sitteth with hands on knee, idle with love for her family. Go forth from her from the dark and dust, and weep beside her, and if weep thou must, if she may not hold thee to her breast, like a weary infant that cries for rest, at least she will press thee to her knee, and tell a low sweet tale to thee, till the hue to thy cheeky, and the light to thine eye, strength to thy limbs and courage high. To thy fainting heart return amen, and away to work thou goest again. From the narrow desert, O pride of man, come into the house so high and wide. Hardly knowing what I did, I opened the door. Why had I not done so before? I do not know. At first I could see no one. When I forced myself past the tree which is the entrance, I saw, seated on the ground and leaning against the tree, with her back to my prison, a beautiful woman. Her countenance seemed known to me, and yet unknown. She looked at me and smiled when I made her appearance. Ah, were you the prisoner there? Very glad I have wiled you out. Did you know me then? Did you not know me? Do you not know me? But you hurt me, and that, I suppose, makes it easy for a man to forget. You broke my globe, yet I thank you. Perhaps I owe you many thanks for breaking it. I took the pieces, all black and wet with crying over them, to the Fairy Queen. There was no music and no light in them now. But she took them from me, and laid them aside, and made me go to sleep in a great hall of white, with black pillars and many red curtains. When I woke in the morning, I went to her, hoping to have my globe again, whole and sound. But she sent me away without it, and I have not seen it since. Nor do I care for it now. I have something so much better. I do not need the globe to play for me, for I can sing. I could not sing at all before. Now I go about everywhere through Fairyland singing till my heart is like to break, just like my globe, for very joy at my own songs. And wherever I go, my songs do good and deliver people, and now I have delivered you, and I'm so happy. She ceased, and tears came into her eyes. All this time I had been gazing at her, and now fully recognized the face of the child glorified in the countenance of the woman. I was ashamed and humbled before her, but a great weight was lifted from my thoughts. I knelt before her, and thanked her, and begged her to forgive me. Rise, rise, she said. I have nothing to forgive. I thank you. But now I must be gone, for I do not know how many may be waiting for me, here and there, through the dark forests, and they cannot come out till I come. She rose, and with a smile and a farewell, turned and left me. I dared not ask her to stay. In fact, I could hardly speak to her. Between me and her there was a great gulf, She was uplifted by sorrow and well-doing into a region I could hardly hope ever to enter. I watched her departure as one watches a sunset. She went like a radiance through the dark wood, which was henceforth bright to me, from simply knowing that such a creature was in it. She was bearing the sun to the unsunned spots. The light and the music of her broken globe were now in her heart and her brain. As she went, she sang, and I caught these few words of her song, and the tones seemed to linger and wind about the trees after she had appeared. Thou goest thine, and I go mine. Many ways we wend, many days and many ways, ending in one end. Many a wrong and its curing song, many a road and many an inn. Room to roam, but only one home for all the world to win. And so she vanished, with a sad heart, soothed by humility and the knowledge of our peace and gladness. I bethought me what now I should do. First I must leave the tower far behind me, lest in some evil moment I might be once more caged with its horrible walls. But it was ill walking in my heavy armor. Besides, I had no right to the golden spurs and resplendent mail, fitly dulled with long neglect. I might do for a squire, but I honored knighthood too highly to call myself any longer one of the noble brotherhood. I stripped off all my armor, piled it under the tree, just where the lady had been seated, and took my unknown way, eastward through the woods. Of all my weapons, I carried only a short axe in my hand. Then first I knew the delight of being lowly, of saying to myself, I am what I am, nothing more. I have failed. I said, I have lost myself. Would it have been my shadow? I looked around. The shadow was nowhere to be seen. Ere long, I learned that it was not myself, but only my shadow that I had lost. I learned that it is better, 1,000-fold, for a proud man to fall and be humbled, than to hold up his head in his pride and fancied innocence. I learned that he will be a hero will barely be a that he yeah. I learned that he that will be a hero will barely be a man, and that he will be nothing but a doer of his work, is of his manhood. And nothing was my ideal lowered, or dimmed, or grown less precious. I only saw it too plainly to set myself for a moment beside it. Indeed, my ideals soon became my life, whereas formerly my life consisted in a vain attempt to behold, if not my ideal in myself, at least myself in my ideal. Now, however I took at first what perhaps was a mistaken pleasure, in despising and degrading myself, another self seemed to arise, like a white spirit from a dead man, from the dumb and trampled self of the past. Doubtless, this self must again die and be buried again. From its tomb spring a white child, but of this my history as yet bears not the record. Self will come to life even in the slaying of self, but there is ever something deeper and stronger than it, where will emerge at last from the unknown abyss of the soul. Will it be a solemn gloom burning with eyes, or a clear morning after the rain, or a smiling child that finds itself nowhere and everywhere? Chapter 23. High-erected thought, seated in a heart of courtesy. Sir Philip Sidney. A sweet, attractive kind of grace, a full assurance given by looks, continual comfort in a face, the lineaments of gospel books. Matthew Royden, on Sir Philip Sidney. I had not got far, for I had but just lost sight of the hated tower, when a voice of another sort, sounding near or far as the trees permitted, or intercepted its passage, reached me. It was a full, deep, manly voice, but withal clear and melodious. Now it burst on the ear with a sudden swell, and anon dying away as suddenly, seeming to come to me across a great space. Nevertheless, it drew nearer, till at last I could distinguish the words of the song and get transient glimpses of the singer. Between the column of the trees he came nearer, dawning upon me like a growing thought. He was a knight, armed from head to heel, mounted upon a strange-looking beast, whose form I could not understand. The words which I heard him sing were like these: "Heart be stout, and eye be true. Good blade out, and ill shall rue. Courage, horse, thou lackest no skill. Well thy force hath matched my will. For the foe with fiery breath at a blow is still in death. Gently, horse, tread fearlessly, till his course that burdens thee. The sun's eye is fierce at noon. Thou and I will rest full soon, and new strength new work will meet, till at length long rest is sweet." And now horse and rider had arrived near enough for me to see, fastened by the long neck to the hinder part of the saddles and trailing in hideous length on the ground behind, the body of a great dragon. It was no wonder that with such a drag at his heels the horse could make slow progress. Notwithstanding his evident dismay, the horrid serpent-like head, with its black tongue forked with red, hanging out of its jaws, dangled against the horse's side. Its neck was covered with long blue hair. Its side was scales of green and gold. Its back was of corrugated skin, of a purple hue. Its belly was similar in nature, but its color was leaden, dashed with blotches of livid blue. Its skinny, black, bat-like wings and its tail were of a dull gray. It was strange to see so many gorgeous colors, so many curved lines, and such beautiful things as wings and hair and scales, combined to form the horrible creature, intense in ugliness. The knight was passing me with a salutation, but as I walked towards him, he reined up, and I stood by his stirrup. When I came near to him, I saw to my surprise and pleasure likewise, although a sudden pain like a burst of fire sprang up in my heart, that it was the knight of the soiled armor, whom I knew before, and whom I had seen in the vision with the Lady of the Marble. But I could throw my arms around him, because she loved him. This discovery only strengthened the resolution I had formed before I recognized him, of offering myself to the knight, to wait upon him as a squire, for he seemed to be unattended. I made request in as few words as possible. He hesitated for a moment, and looked at me thoughtfully. I saw that he suspected who I was, but that he continued uncertain of his suspicion. No doubt he was soon convinced of its truth, but all the time I was with him, not a word crossed with his lips with reference to what he evidently concluded I wished to leave unnoticed, if not to be concealed. "Squire and knight should be friends," said he. "Can you take me by the hand?" And he held out the great gauntleted right hand. I grasped it willingly and strongly. Not a word more was said. The knight gave the sign to his horse, which again began its slow march, and I walked beside and a little behind. We had not gone very far before we arrived at a little cottage, from which, as we drew near, a woman rushed out with the cry, my child, have you found my child?" "I have found her," replied the knight, "but she is sorely hurt. I was forced to leave her with the hermit as I returned. You will find her there, and I think she will get better. You see, I have brought you a present. This wretch will not hurt you again." And he undid the creature's neck, and flung the frightful burden down by the cottage door. The woman was now almost out of sight in the wood, but the husband stood at the back with speechless thanks in his face. "You must bury the monster," said the knight. "If I had arrived a moment later, I should have been too late. But now you need not fear, for such a creature as this very rarely appears in the same part twice during a lifetime." "Will you not dismount and rest you, Sir Knight?" said the peasant, who by this time recovered himself a little. "That I will, thankfully," said he, and dismounting, he gave the reins to me, and told me to unbridle the horse, and lead him into the shade. "You need not tie him up," he added. "He will not run away." When I returned after obeying his orders, and entered the cottage, I saw the knight seated, without his helmet, and talking, most familiar with the simple host. I stood at the open door for a moment, and gazed at him, inwardly justified the white lady in preferring him to me. A nobler countenance I never saw. Loving kindness beamed from every line on his face. It seemed as if he would repay himself for the late arduous combat by indulging in all the gentleness of a womanly heart. But when the talk ceased for a moment, he seemed to fall in a reverie. Then the exquisite curves of the upper lip vanished. The lip was lengthened and compressed at the same moment. You could have told that, within the lips, the teeth were firmly closed. The whole face grew stern and determined, all but fierce. Only the eyes burned on like a holy sacrifice, uplift on a granite rock. The woman entered, with her mangled child in her arms. She was pale as her little burden. She gazed with a wild love and despairing tenderness on the still, all but dead face, white and clear from the loss of blood and terror. The knight rose. The light had been confined to his eyes, now shone from his whole countenance. He took the little thing in his arms, and with the mother's help, undressed her and looked into her wounds. The tears flowed down from his face as he did so. With tender hands he bound them up, kissed the pale cheek, and gave her back to her mother. When he went home, all his tale would be of the grief and joy of the parents, while to me, who had looked on, the gracious countenance of the armed man, beaming from the panoply of steel over the seemingly dead child, while the powerful hands tended and shifted it, and bound it, if possible even more gently than the mother's, formed the center of the story. After we had partaken of the best they could give us, the knight took his leave with a few parting instructions to the mother as how he should treat the child. I brought the knight his steed. He held the stirrup while he mounted, brought the knight his steed, held the stirrup while he mounted, and then followed him through the wood. The horse, delighted to be free of his hideous load, bounded beneath the weight of the man in armor. It could hardly be restrained from galloping, but the knight made him time his powers to mind, and so we went on for an hour or two. Then the knight dismounted, compelled me to get into the saddle, saying, "Knight and squire must share the labor." Holding by the stirrup, he walked along by my side, heavily clad as he was with apparent ease. As we went, he led a conversation in which I took what humble part my sense of my condition would permit me. "Somehow or other," said he, "notwithstanding the beauty of this country of Faerie in which we are in, there is much that is wrong in it. If there are great splendors, there are corresponding horrors, heights and depths. Beautiful women and awful fiends, noble men and weaklings. All a man has to do is to better what he can, and if he will settle it within himself that even renown and success are in themselves of no great value, and be content to be defeated, if so be that the fault is not his, and so go to his work with a cool brain and a strong will, he will get it done, and fare none the worse to an end, that he was not burdened with provision and precaution." "But he will not always come off well," I ventured to say. "Perhaps not," rejoined the knight, "in the individual act, but the result of his lifetime will content him." "So it will fare with you, doubtless," thought I, but for me, venturing to resume the conversation after a pause, I said hesitatingly, May I ask for what the little beggar girl wanted your aid when she came to castle to find you?" He looked at me for a moment in silence and then said, "I cannot help wondering how you know of that, but there is something about you quite strange enough to entitle you to the privilege of the country, namely, to go unquestioned. I, however, being only a man that such as you see me, am ready to tell you anything you like to ask me, as far as I can. The little beggar girl came into the hall where I was sitting, and told me a very curious story, which I only recollect very vaguely. It was so peculiar. What I recall is that she was sent to gather wings, and as soon as she had gathered a couple wings for herself, she was to fly away, she said, to the country she came from, but where that was, she could give no information. She said she had to beg her wings from the butterflies and moths, and wherever she begged, no one refused her. But after needing a great many of the wings of butterflies and moths to make a pair for her, and so she had to wander about day after day looking for the butterflies and night after night looking for moths. and then she begged for their wings. But the day before, she had come into a part of the forest. She said there were multitudes of splendorous butterflies flitting about with wings which were just fit to make the eyes and the shoulders of hers, and she knew she could have as many of them as she liked for the asking. But as soon as she began to beg, there came a great creature right up to her, and threw her down and walked over her. When she got up, she saw the wood was full of these beings stalking about, and seemed to have nothing to do with each other. As soon as she began to beg, one of them walked over, till at last, but less in dismay and in growing horror of the senseless creature, she had run away to look for somebody to help her. I asked her what they were like. She said like great men made of wood, without knee or elbow joints, without any noses or mouths or eyes in their faces. I laughed at the little maiden, thinking she was making child's game of me, but, although she burst out laughing too, she persisted in asserting the truth of her story. Only come, knight, come and see, and I will lead you. So I armed myself to be ready for anything that might happen, and follow the child. For although I could make nothing of her story, I could see that she was a little human being in need of some help or other. As she walked before me, I looked attentively at her. Whether or not it was from her being so knocked down and walked over, I could not tell, but her clothes were very much torn, and in several places her white skin was peeping through. I thought she was humpbacked, but on looking more closely, I saw through the tatters of her frock, do not laugh at me, a bundle on each shoulder. The most gorgeous colors. Looking yet more closely, I saw that they were the shape of folded wings, and were made of all kinds of butterfly wings and moth wings, crowded together like the feathers on the individual butterfly pinion, but like them, most beautifully arranged and producing a perfect harmony of color and shade. I could now more easily believe the rest of her story, especially as I saw every now and then a certain heaving motion of the wings, as if they longed to be uplifted and outspread, but beneath their scanty garments complete wings could not be concealed. Indeed, from her own story, they were yet unfinished. After walking for 2 or 3 hours, how the little girl found her way I could not imagine. We came to a part of the forest, the very air of which was quivering with the motions of multitudes of resplendent butterflies, as gorgeous in color as if the eyes of peacock's feather had taken to flight, but of infinite variety of hue and form, only that the appearance of some kind of eye on each wing predominated. There they are, cried the child in a tone of victory mingled with terror. Except for this tone, I should have thought she referred to the butterflies, for I could see nothing else. But the moment, an enormous butterfly whose wings had great eyes of blue, surrounded with confused, cloudy heaps of the more dingy colorings, just like a break in the clouds on a stormy day towards evening still near, the child instantly began murmuring, "Butterfly, butterfly, give me your wings." When the moment after she fell to the ground and began crying as if hurt, I drew my sword and weaved a great blow in the direction in which the child had fallen. It struck something, and instantly the most grotesque imitation of a man became visible. You see, this fairyland is full of oddities and all sorts of incredible, ridiculous things, which a man is compelled to meet and treat as real existences, although all the time he feels foolish for doing so. This being it be called, was like a block of wood roughly hewn into the mere outlines of a man, and hardly so, for it had but head, body, legs, and arms, the head without a face, and the limbs utterly formless. I had hewn off one of its legs, but the 2 portions moved as best they could, and quite independent of each other, so that I had done no good. I ran after it, and clove it in twain from the head downwards, but it could not be convinced that its vocation was not to walk over people, for as soon as the little girl began begging again, all 3 parts came bustling up. If I had not interposed my weight between her and them, she would have been trampled under them. I saw that something else must be done. If the wood was full of creatures, it would be an endless work to chop them so small that they could do no injury. And then, beside the parts would be so numerous that the butterflies would be in danger from the drift of flying chips. I served this one, however, and then told the child to beg again, and I pointed out the direction in which one was coming. I was glad to find, however, that I could not see him myself, and I wondered how he could have been invisible before. I would not allow him to walk over the child, but while I kept him off, and she began begging again, Another appeared, and it was all I could do from the weight of armor to protect her from the stupid, persevering efforts of the two. But suddenly, the right plan occurred to me. I had tripped one of them up, and taking him by the legs, set him on his head with his heels against a tree. I was delighted to find he could not move. Meantime, the poor child was walked over by the other. But it was for the last time. When everyone appeared, I followed the same plan, tripped him up, and set him up on his head, and so the little beggar was able to gather up her wings without any trouble, which occupation she continued for several hours in my company. What became of her, I asked. I took her home with me to my castle. She told me all our story, but it seemed to me all the time if I were hearing a child talk in its sleep. I could not arrange her story in my mind, although it seemed to leave her in some certain order of its own. My wife, here the knight checked himself and said no more. Neither did I urge the conversation further. Okay, we gotta do an ad break. Then we'll back. This should be the last ad break we need to do for tonight. Okay, we back. Okay, let's finish up the story. Thus we journeyed for several days, resting at night in such shelter as we could get, and when no better was to be had, lying in the forest under some tree, on a couch of old leaves. I loved the night more and more. I believe never squire served his master with more care and joyfulness than I. I tended his horse, I cleaned his armor. My skill in the craft enabled me to repair it when necessary. Watched his needs and was well repaid for it by the love itself which I bore him. This, I said to myself, is a true man. I will serve him and give him all worship, sing in him the embodiment of what I would fain become. If I cannot be noble myself, I will yet be servant to his nobleness. He in return soon showed me such signs of friendship and respect as made my heart glad, and I felt that, after all, mine would be no lost life, if I might wait on him to the world's end, although no smile but his should greet me, and no one but him should say, "Well done, he was a good servant." At last, but I burned to do something more for him than the ordinary routine of a squire's duty permitted. One afternoon we began to observe an appearance of roads in the wood. Branches had been cut down and openings made where footsteps had worn no path below. These indications increased as we passed on, till at length we came into a long, narrow avenue, formed by felling the trees in its line as the remaining roots evidenced. At some little distance, on both hands, were observed signs of similar avenues, which appeared to converge with ours towards one spot. Along these, we instinctively saw several forms moving, which seemed, with ourselves, to approach the common center. Our path brought us at last up to a wall of yew trees, growing close together and intertwining their branches so that nothing could be seen beyond. An opening was cut in it like a door, and at the wall was trimmed smooth and perpendicular. The knight dismounted, and waited till I had provide for his comfort, upon which we entered the place together. It was a great space bare of trees, but enclosed by 4 walls of yew, similar to that which we had entered. These trees grew to a very great height, and did not divide from each other till close to the top, where their summits formed a row of conical battlements all around the walls. The space contained was a parallelogram of great length. Along each of the 2 longer sides of the interior were ranged 3 ranks of men in white robes, standing silent and solemn, each with a sword by his side, although the rest of his costume and bearing was more priestly than soldierly. For some distance inwards, the space between the opposite rows were filled with a company of men, women, and children in holiday attire. The looks of all were directly inwards, towards the further end, far beyond the crowd, in a long avenue, seeming to narrow in the instance, with the long rows of the white-robed men, on what the attention of the multitude was fixed. We could not tell, for the sun had set before we arrived, and it was growing dark within. It grew darker and darker. The multitude waited in silence. The stars began to shine into enclosure, and they grew brighter and larger every moment. A wind arose, and swayed the pinnacles of the tree-tops, and made a strange sound, half like music, half like moaning, although the closed branches and the leaves of the tree walls. A young girl who stood beside me, clothed in the same dress as the priest, bowed her head and grew pale with awe. The knight whispered to me, "How solemn it is! Surely they wait to hear the voice of a prophet, or something good near." But I, though somewhat shaken by the feeling expressed by my master, yet had an unaccountable conviction that here was something bad, so I resolved to be keenly on watch for what should follow. Suddenly a great star like a sun appeared high in the air over the temple, illuminating it throughout, and a great song arose from the men in white, which went rolling around and round the building, now receding to the end, and now approaching down the other side, the place where we stood, for some of the singers were regularly ceasing, and next to them, as regularly taking up the song, they crept towards with gradations produced by changes which could not themselves be detected, for only a few of those who were singing ceased at the same moment. The song paused, and I saw a company of 6 of the white-robed men walking up the center of the human avenue, surrounding a youth gorgeously attired beneath his robe of white, and wearing a chaplet of flowers on his head. I followed them closely with my keenest observation, and by accompanying their slow progress with my eyes, I was able to perceive more clearly what took place when they arrived at the other end. I knew that my sight was so much more keen than that of most people, that I had good reason to suppose I should see more than the rest could. At such a distance, the further end, a throne stood upon a platform, high above the heads of the surrounding priests. To this platform I saw the company begin to ascend. Apparently, by an inclined plane or gentle slope, the throne itself was elevated again on a kind of square pedestal, to the top of which led a flight of steps. The throne stood a majestic-looking figure, whose posture seemed to indicate a mixture of pride and benignity. As they looked down on the multitude below, the company ascended to the foot of the throne, where they all kneeled for some minutes. Then they arose and passed along to the right side of the pedestal upon which the throne stood. Here they crowded close behind the youth, putting him in the foremost place, and one of them opened a door in the pedestal for the youth to enter. I was sure I saw him shrink back, and those crowding behind pushed him, and then again rose a burst of song from the multitude in white, which lasted some time. When it ceased, a new company of 7 commenced in much up the center. As they advanced, I looked up at my master with his noble countenance, was full of reverence and awe, incapable of evil himself. You could scarcely suspect it in another, much less in a multitude such as this, and surrounded with such appearances of solemnity. I was certain it was the really grand accompaniments that overcame him. The stars overhead, the dark towering tops of the yew trees, and the wind that, like an unseen spirit, sighed through the branches, bowed his spirit to the belief that in all these ceremonies lay some great mystical meaning, which his humility told him his ignorance prevented him from understanding. More convinced than before that there was evil here, I could not endure that my master should be deceived, that one like him, so pure and noble, should respect what, if my suspicions were true, was worse than the ordinary deceptions of priestcraft. I could not tell how far he might be led to countenance, and otherwise support their doings before he should find cause to repent bitterly of his error. I watched the new position yet more keenly, if possible, than the former. This time, the central figure was a girl, and at close I observed yet more indubitably the shrinking back and the crowding push. What happened to the victims I never learned, but I had learned enough, and I could bear it no longer. I stooped and whispered to the young girl who stood by me to lend me her white garment. I wanted it that I might not be entirely out of keeping with the solemnity, but might have at least his help in passing unquestioned. She looked up, half amused and half bewildered, as if doubting whether I was in earnest or not, but in her perplexity she permitted to fasten and slip it down from her shoulders. I easily got possession of it, and sinking down on my knees in the crowd, I rose apparently in the habit of one of the worshippers. Giving my battle-axe to the girl, told it for pledge for the return of her stole, for I wished to test the matter unarmed, and if it was a man that sat upon the throne, to attack him with hands bare, as I supposed he must be. I made my way through the crowd to the front, while the singing yet continued. Desirous of reaching the platform, was unoccupied by way of priests. I was permitted to walk the long avenue of white robes unmolested, though I saw questioning looks in many of the faces as I passed. I presume my coolness aided my passage, for I felt quite indifferent to my own fate, not feeling, after the late events of my history, that I was at all worth taking care of, and enjoying, perhaps, something of an evil satisfaction in the revenge I was taking upon the self which had fooled me so long. When I arrived on the platform, the songs had just ceased, and I felt as if they were looking toward me, but instead of kneeling at its foot, I walked right up to the stairs to the throne, laid hold of a great wooden image that seemed to sit upon it, and tried to hurl it from its seat. In this I failed at first, for I found it firmly fixed, but in dread lest the first shock of amazement passed away, the guards would rush upon me before I had effected my purpose. I strained with all my might, With a noise of cracking and breaking, and tearing of rotten wood, something gave way. I hurled the image down the steps. Its displacement revealed a great hole in the throne, like the hollow of a decayed tree, going down apparently a great way. But I had no time to examine it, for as I looked up, out of it rushed a great brute like a wolf, but twice the size, and tumbled me headlong with itself down the steps of the throne. As we fell, however, I caught it by the throat. The moment we reached the platform, a struggle commenced, in which I soon got uppermost, and my hand upon its throat, and knee upon its heart. For now arose a wild cry of wrath and revenge and rescue. A universal hiss of steel, as every sword was swept from its scabbard, seemed to tear the very air in shreds. I heard the rush of hundreds toward the platform on which I knelt. I only tightened grasp of the brute's throat. His eyes were already starting from his head, and his tongue hanging out. My anxious hope was that, even after they had killed me, they would be unable to undo my grip of his throat, before the monster was past breathing. I therefore threw all my will and force and purpose into the grasping hand. I remember no blow. A faintness came over me, and my consciousness departed. Chapter 24. We are near like angels till our passions die. Decker. This wretched inn, where we scarce stay to bait, we call our dwelling place. We call one step a race, but angels in their full enlightened state. Angels who live and know what 'tis to be. Who all the nonsense of our language see, who speak things in our words till their ill-drawn pictures scorn. When we by a foolish figure say, "Behold an old man dead," then they speak properly and cry, "Behold a man-child born." Cowley. I was dead, and right content. I lay in my coffin with my hands folded in peace. The night and the lady I loved wept over me. Our tears fell on my face. Said the night, I rushed among them like a madman. I hewed them down like a brushwood. Their swords battered on me like hail, but hurt me not. I cut a lane to my friend. He was dead, but he had throttled the monster, and I had to cut the handful out of his throat before I could disengage and carry off his body. They dared not molest me as I brought him back. He died well, said the lady. My spirit rejoiced. They left me to my repose. I felt as if a cool hand had been laid upon my heart, and it stilled it. My soul was like a summer evening, after a heavy fall of rain, where the drops were yet glistening on the trees in the last rays of the down-going sun, and the wind of the twilight had begun to blow. The hot fever of life had gone by, and I breathed the clear mountain air of the land of death. I had never dreamed of such blessedness. It was not that I had in any way ceased to be what I had been. The very fact that anything can die implies the existence of something that cannot die, which must either take to itself another form, as when the seed that is sown dies and rises again, or in conscious existence may perhaps continue to lead a purely spiritual life. If my passions were dead, the souls of the passions, those essential mysteries of the spirit which had embodied themselves in the passions and had given them all their glory and wonderment, yet lived, yet glowed with a pure undying fire. They arose from their vanishing earthly garments, and disclosed themselves angels of light. But oh, how beautiful beyond the old form! I lay thus for a time, and lived as it were an unradiating existence, my soul a motionless lake, that received all things and gave nothing back, setified in still contemplation and spiritual consciousness. Ere long they bore me to my grave. Never child lay down in his white bed, and heard the sound of his playthings being laid aside for the night, with a more luxurious satisfaction of repose than I knew, when I felt the coffin settle on the firm earth, and the sound of the falling mold upon its lid. It has not the same hollow rattle within the coffin that it sends up the edge of the grave. They buried me in no graveyard. They loved me too much for that. I thank them. But they laid me in the ground of their own castle amid many trees, where, as it was springtime, were growing primroses and bluebells and all the families of the woods. Now that I lay in her bosom, the whole earth and each of her many births were as a body to me. At my will, I seemed to feel the great heart of the mother beating into mine, and feeding me with her own life, her own essential being and nature. I heard the footsteps of my friends above, and they sent a thrill through my heart. I knew that the helpers had gone, and that the night of the lady remained, and spoke low, gentle, cheerful words of him who lay lay beneath the yet wounded sod. I rose into a single large primrose that grew by the edge of the grave, and from the window of the humble, trusting face, I looked full in the countenance of the lady. I felt that I could manifest myself in the primrose. That is set apart of what I wanted to say, just as in the old time. I had used to betake myself to a song for the same end. The flower caught her eye. She stooped and plucked it, saying, "Oh, you beautiful creature," and lightly kissing it, put it on her bosom. It was the first kiss she had ever given me, but the flower soon began to wither, and I forsook it. It was evening. The sun was below the horizon, but its rosy beams yet illuminated a feathery cloud that floated high above the world. I arose. I reached the cloud, and throwing myself upon it, floated with it in sight of the sinking sun. He sank, and the cloud grew gray, but the grayness touched not my heart. It carried its rose hue within, for now I could love without needing to be loved again. The moon came gliding up with all the past in her wan face. She changed my couch into a ghostly pallor, and threw all the earth below as to the bottom of a pale sea of dreams. But she could not make me sad. I knew now that is by loving, and not being loved, that one can come nearest the soul of another. Yea, that where two love, it is the loving of each other, and not the being loved by the other, that originates and perfects and assures their blessedness. I knew that love gives to him that loveth power over any soul beloved, even if that soul know him not, bring him inwardly close to that spirit, a power that cannot be but for good. For in proportion as selfishness intrudes, the love ceases, and the power which springs therefrom dies. Yet all love will one day meet it with its return. All true love will one day behold its own image in the eyes of the beloved, and be humbly glad. This is possible in the realms of lofty death. Ah, my friends, thought I, how I will tend you and wait upon you, and haunt you with my love. My floating chariot bore me over a great city. Its faint, dull sound steamed up into the air. Sound how composed, how many hopeless cries, thought I, and how many mad shouts go to make up the tumult. Here so faint where I float in eternal peace, knowing that they will one day be stilled in the surrounding calm, and that despair dies into infinite hope, and the seeming impossible there is the law here. But O pale-faced women and gloomy-browed men and forgotten children, how I will wait on you, and minister to you, and putting my arms about you in the dark, think hope into your hearts, where you fancy no one is near. Soon as my senses have all come back, and have grown accustomed to this new blessed life, I will be among you with the love that healeth. With this, a pang and a terrible shudder went through me. A writhing as of death convulsed me, and I became once again conscious of a more limited, even a bodily and earthly life. Chapter 25. Our life is no dream, but it ought to become one, and perhaps will. Novalis. And on the ground, where is my modrus gate, I knock with my staff, ehrlich and late, and say to hire, Eve mother, let me in. Chaucer, the Pardoner's Tale. Slinking from such a state of ideal bliss into the world of shadows which again closed around and enfolded me, my first dread was not unnaturally that my own shadow had found me again, that my torture had commenced anew. It was a sad revulsion of feeling. This indeed seemed to correspond to what we think death is before we die. Yet I felt within me a power of calm enduring to which I had hitherto been a stranger. For in truth, that I should be able if only to think such things that I had been thinking, such was an unspeakable delight. An hour of such peace made the tumult of a lifetime worth striving enough. I found myself lying in the open air, in the early morning before sunrise. Over me rose the summer heaven, expectant of the sun. The clouds already saw him, coming from afar, and soon every dewdrop would rejoice in his individual presence within. I lay motionless for a few minutes, and then slowly rose and looked about me. I was on the summit of a little hill. A valley lay beneath, and a range of mountains closed up the view upon that side. To my horror, across the valley and up the height of the opposing mountains, stretched from my very feet, a huge expanding shade. There it lay, long and large, dark and mighty. I turned away with a sick despair when lo, I beheld the sun just lifting his head upon the eastern hill, and the shadow that fell from me lay only where his beam fell not. I danced for joy, for it was only the natural shadow that goes with every man who walks in the sun. As he arose higher and higher, the shadow head sank down the side of the opposite hill, and crept in across the valley towards my feet. Now that I was joyously delivered from this fear, I saw and recognized the country around me, and the valley below lay my own castle, and the haunts of my childhood were all about me hastened home. My sisters received me with unspeakable joy, but I suppose they observed some change in me, for a kind of respect, with a slight touch of awe in it, mingled with their joy and made me ashamed. They had been in great distress about me, when, on the morning of my disappearance, they had found the floor of my room flooded, and all that day a wondrous and nearly impervious mist had hung around the castle and grounds. I had gone, they told me, 21 days. To me it seemed 21 years, nor could I yet feel quite secure in my new experiences. When at night I lay down once more in my own bed, I did not feel at all sure that when I awoke, I should not find myself in some mysterious region of fairyland. My dreams were incessant and perturbed, for when I did awake, I saw clearly that I was in my own house. My mind soon grew calm, and I began the duties of my new position, somewhat instructed, I hope, by the adventures that had befallen me in fairyland. Could I translate the experiences of my travels there into common life? This was the question, or must I live it all over again, and learn it all over again in the other forms that belong to the world of men, whose experiences yet runs parallel to that of fairyland? These questions I cannot answer, but I fear. Even yet, I find myself looking round sometimes with anxiety to see whether my shadow falls right from the sun or no. I have never yet discovered any inclination to either side, and if I am not unfrequently sad, I yet cast no more of a shade on the earth than most men who have lived in as long as I have. I have a strange feeling sometimes that I am a ghost sent into the world to minister to my fellow men, or rather, to repair the wrongs I have already done. May the world be brighter for me, at least in those portions of it where my darkness falls not. Thus I, who set out to find my ideal, came back rejoicing that I had lost my shadow. When the thought of the blessedness I had experienced after my death in fairyland is too high for me to lay hold upon it and hope in it, I often think of the wise woman in the cottage, and of her solemn assurance that she knew something too good to be told. When I am oppressed by any sorrow or real perplexity, I often feel as if I had only left her cottage for a time, it would soon return out to the vision to it again. Sometimes on such occasions I find myself unconsciously almost looking about for the mystic mark of red with the vague hope of entering the door, and being comforted by her wise tenderness, I then consoled myself by saying, "They have come through the door of dismay, and the way back from the world into which that has led me is through my tomb. Upon that red sign lies, and I shall find it one day and be glad." I will end my story with the relation of an incident which befell me a few days ago. I had been with many reapers, and when they ceased their work at noon, I had lain down under the shadow of a great ancient beech tree that stood on the edge of the field. As I lay with my eyes closed, I began to listen to the sound of the leaves overhead. At first, they made sweet, inarticulate music alone, but by and by the sound seemed to take shape and to be gradually molding itself into words, till at last I seemed to be able to distinguish these half dissolve into a little ocean of circumfluent notes. "A great good is coming to thee, Anodos." And so over and over again I fancied that the sound reminded me of the voice of the ancient woman in the cottage, of the ancient woman in the cottage that was foursquare. I opened my eyes and for a moment almost believed that I saw her face with its many wrinkles and its young eyes, looking at me from between two hoary branches of the beech overhead. But when I looked more keenly, I only saw twigs and leaves, and the infinite sky in tiny spots gazing there between. Yet I know what good is coming to me, that good is always coming, though few have at all times the simplicity and the courage to believe it. What we call evil is the only and best shape, which for the person and his condition at the time, could be assumed by the best good, and so, farewell. And that is book Phantastes, A Faerie Romance by George MacDonald. So I hope y'all enjoyed reading from that. And I hope you be in tune in for my other readings and new stuff next time.